Well, serving God is just that. It's a personal choice. It's not about a church. It's not about dinners. It's not about get-togethers. It's about a personal choice. When you realize that you're at a crossroads, God will forgive you. And that was a tough thing for me to understand, that I did a lot of things I wasn't proud of. And I had to ask forgiveness for.
This is such an incredible story. You go from, just low down, bottom of the barrel, addicted to almost everything that you could think of, to this on fire, exuberant, going to the party houses, telling them about what's happened. And it's such an instant transformation. Hi, welcome to the Cross Encounter podcast, where we can sit at the feet of Jesus and everyone is welcome. I'm so excited to have my guest, Reverend Buddy McGlothlin, today, also my dad, and he's got an incredible testimony to share with you, where God brought him out of a life of addiction and bad habits and brought him into the ministry world, now ministering with my mom, and people's lives are being changed everywhere. So if you're struggling with addiction or have a family member who struggled, then this is your podcast today, because we are going to hear some miraculous stories. So, Buddy, thank you so much for being on the show today and being my guest. So I'm so honored to have you.
It's great to be with you. I always enjoy spending time with you, girl.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go back to, you have an incredible testimony, but I want to go back to when I was 6 years old, kind of where it all started. So this was when I first met you. I was still just a baby, and you and my mom met and got married, and it all kind of started there. So let's go back to the beginning, how you and mom met and what was your life like at that time. Let's go into the space you were in at that very season.
Wow. That's going back a ways. But, I met your mother when I was working for a company that her mother worked for, and your grandmother. And I saw her, thought she was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And I was running with a little different crowd, and her mother knew that. So she found out that I expressed some interest in Veronica, and she evaporated for about 10 years out of my life. So, which was probably a good thing. But your grandmother was a very wise woman.
Really? You wouldn't say.
But yeah, we got back together. It was kind of a unique thing. I was talking to Diane, your grandmother, and she told me that, Veronica was going through some things and having a tough time. And I said, man, I'm sorry to hear that. I said, I am too. I'm going through a really difficult season in my life. And Diane said, well, maybe a great idea for you guys to get together and have dinner or something. And we did. And the rest is history.
So she changed her tune a little bit about
Changed
you
my
there.
tune. Well, a lot of years had passed, and I had settled to a degree. Now, not totally settled. I had settled to a degree.
Yeah.
But your mom and I we had fun together, enjoyed each other. We both needed some laughter in our life and needed a change from the things the trials that we were going through.
Wow. So that's incredible. So I remember meeting you when I was 6 years old. And when you and mom got married, I remember you said you were marrying me too. And I just remember what I knew of you at the time was always, Buddy is my dad. And so I would dress up in the princess outfits and I was just convinced that I was a princess. And so I had such a blessed life with you guys growing up, but I know that when you were probably my age or maybe even a little bit younger and older, you grew up in a little bit different circumstance, didn't you? Tell me what your childhood was like compared to, ours and our families with my childhood.
It was a little different. My father got killed in a car accident when I was 12.
Yeah.
So, all of a sudden my mother's raising my older sister and younger brother, and it was quite challenging for her, and she did an awesome job. I mean, loved us, took care of all of our needs. We were not very wealthy. We didn't have a lot, but Mom made sure we had the basics, and she took care of us. So at that age, I started working. I knew I was going to have some way to support myself and to get the little things that I'd like to have that I'd see other people enjoy. So I got paper routes. I worked in the 5 and dime store. I mowed yards. I just did a lot of odd things. Stayed busy and played sports and so it was fun growing up. It was, like I said, it was difficult after my father passed away, and then a few years into high school and I started drifting away, drinking a lot. That was kind of my escape. I didn't realize it at the time that I needed a therapist, but I probably did. And but I kind of drifted away from church, and from after Dad passed away, we didn't go to church like we used to, and I kind of drifted away from all the foundational things that had kept me on the straight and narrow.
So tell me, what age, you mentioned doing all of these things and staying busy and actually working. What age were you when you first started working?
Oh, my goodness. I think I was at the 5 and dime store when I was 10.
Wow.
And they had the old wooden floors, and and they would oil those floors. And the guy that ran the thing, I hung around and he kind of liked me, and he would let me help him oil the floors. But it was just awesome to me because it wouldn't work. We'd put the oil down the floors and I could skate from one end of the store to the other. Nobody was there. And he paid us. They had a counter where they had chocolates and peanuts and stuff they sold. And he would pay me and if a friend was with me, he'd pay us in chocolate and peanuts.
There you go. I can't. It's hard for me to fathom because that's not even legal now. But you had so much fun, and he was, sounded like kind of a dad figure to you. And it was just a different time for sure, because that would never happen now. But you were so motivated at such a young age, and that's always how I've remembered you as well, as my dad is super motivated, very, very, motivated and driven. So you had this innate in you. It's almost like when I listen to your stories, it's like you had to be the one to take care of the family now, and you stepped up to that role. So at what point in your life, I'm wondering, did the switch happen where you're like, I'm going to try this drug or try this alcohol? What caused the switch, you think?
Well, when I went to college, that's really, I was exposed to a bigger world, a much larger world, and that's where I was exposed to a lot of the drugs, and I always said, hey, I'll do drugs, but I'll never let drugs do me, and I'll never do a needle, and those were things I stayed pretty true to. I didn't get into the hardcore stuff. I did get into later on in life. I did get into the cocaine and the crack and all that, learning how to cook it down and do all those things and stay in the parties for 2 and 3 days at a time and never see the outside world, just in there cooking up drugs and partying, basically.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And so when Mom and you met, were you, still dabbling into that stuff?
Yes, I was still doing coke. I wasn't doing the crack at that time. I'd gotten away from that, but I was still doing Quaaludes and uppers and downers and pot. I was a big pothead. I loved to smoke pot. And then, of course, I was mixing all that with the alcohol.
Yeah.
So, it was, and I'd been drinking since, for years. For years and years. Since I was probably 16 years old, I was seriously drinking, and I thought that was the root of any party, was to have alcohol. So people would ask me to go bike riding or go do something. I'd say, look, if I can't take my cooler, I ain't about it, okay? So cooler doesn't go, I don't go.
Wow. That is such a wild story, because I never really got to see that part of you. So the part of you that I saw growing up was, hey, this is my dad. We're gonna, hang out, and he's gonna be the cool dad, and help me and teach me and do fun things and let me play dress up and let me, be in my creative world. And so I never really knew that any of this was going on. So this is what you're telling me is just a whole nother Buddy McGlothlin that I never really got to see. So it's just hard to envision it's like two different people. It's almost hard to believe because I hear these stories from the family and I'm like, but that's not the guy I ever knew. So it's wild. But let's talk about so you had already, dated my mom and you guys got married. Tell me a little bit about that, how the relationship went with you still, because I know she didn't know you were concealing it, right? So
She knew about the drinking,
right,
but
okay.
the drugs,
So
no.
so how did she find out, and how long
She
did it
didn't
take?
know until I'd actually gotten saved, and I came in and started discarding all of those things,
Wow,
and I'd kept it pretty well hidden from her.
wow,
And she just really thought it was the drinking. She didn't realize that
yeah.
all the other things were part of the equation.
So with that being said, what do you think was the lowest point in your life where you felt like you were just did you have a rock bottom moment or the lowest point where you're thinking, you finally are broken? Did you have that moment ever?
I didn't know. I didn't.
Wow.
Uh, I remember about 2 weeks before my life changed, that it was a really difficult time in our marriage. I'm certainly thankful that you didn't see all of that. Your mother has always been so guarded,
Yeah.
with you and Lauren Rose about being exposed to anything that would make you think a different way than we would want you to. So, we want you to be exposed to all the reality of things, but there are certain things that, don't need to be exposed to. And she was very careful not to expose you to any of the things that I was doing but at 2 weeks before, I had just said, okay, this isn't working. I'm going to leave Elyssia and Veronica. I'm done.
Wow.
I'm done with this. And I did not know at the same time when I was thinking this, Veronica was telling God, said, okay, you either fix him or move him out. I can't go on like this, because I'd gotten really abrasive and verbally abusive. I mean, it was, I'm ashamed. It's hard for me to even admit to it. It's because I love your mother so much. I just can't believe I was ever that way, but I was. And it was the drugs and it was the alcohol and it was the enemy in my mind convincing me that this was the thing I needed to be doing. Mm. So I talked to a friend of mine who had moved to Knoxville and was a sales manager at an equipment company there in Knoxville. And he was one of my old cocaine buddies from the coal fields. And talked with him, and he said, hey, come on down to Knoxville, man. I'll put you on, and we can pick up where we left off. And I said, I'll do it, man. I'm ready. I'm ready for a change. So your mother had no idea, and I had no idea she was wanting to pray me out. And within that 2-week period was when one Friday night, there was a Karen Wheaton concert at the church that Veronica would take me to sometimes, and I would go hungover and sit there and just try to cover my ears up because the music was too loud and my head hurt too bad.
Yeah.
And it was just that night was a night of destiny for me. It was just without me understanding that I needed something, God was there waiting for me to be in a place where he could speak with me.
Wow. So explain, just for those who might not know, who Karen Wheaton is.
Oh, she is a gospel singer, and a contemporary gospel singer. Very talented girl, and I loved her music. And so we I come home from work, and Veronica is sick. I mean, literally, I've never known her to be sick. She's sick. She's actually vomiting and it's seriously sick. So I'm thinking, I ain't gonna have to go to church tonight. And I already had my buddies up at a local restaurant that had a bar, and I had already told them I'd be up there by 9 o'clock. I say, if she makes me go, I can have her mad by 9, and I'll be on up. So don't worry, I'll be up there a little bit later. And so when I saw your mother sick, I said, man, this ain't going to happen. So I'll just head on up there, put her to bed, and I'll go on up there. So your mother looked at me and she said, I said, I guess we can't go to church tonight. I said, you're not feeling well enough. And she knew something was going to happen. And she said, Buddy, if they have to carry me to church on a cot, we are going to church tonight. And I said, well, okay. So we had to stop on the way and got some Pepto-Bismol and just things to try to help her. And so we get to church, and we were there not really early, but a little bit early. And I looked around, and way down the aisle sat a guy's name was David Taylor. And I grew up with David Taylor. He grew up right down the street from where I was, and he was a pure hellion in those days. He was he was like the coolest Fonz, from Happy Days, the Fonz. He was that kind of cool. And I always emulated him. So I looked over and I saw David, and I said, oh, man, this is going to be okay. So I excused myself from you and your mom, and I scooted over there by David, and I sat down beside of him, and I could tell in about 3 seconds that wasn't the same David that I grew up with. Something was different about him. And so it made me uncomfortable because I was ready to pal up with the old David, and I didn't know who I was palling up with. So I got back up and excused myself and went back over and sat down, and you were sitting on my lap, and the concert went on, and I sat there with my arms crossed, bowed up. I was just determined that if I had to be there, nobody's going to be happy either. So through that evening, things just started to break inside of me. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't have a clue. And I remember looking at your mother and saying, we ought to go to your papa's church Sunday. And as soon as those words came out of my mouth, there was a voice spoke to me and said, now, how are you going to do that, buddy? You're going to be hungover. You're going to be sick. Now you're going to have to get up and drive down there and sit through church. Why in the world would you say that? And I sit there thinking, why did I say that? So she sings a couple more songs, and she has an altar call. And I'm sitting there, and there's just something breaking inside of me, and I'm so uncomfortable with it all. I just don't know what to do with myself. And then she has the altar call, and you're sitting on my lap. And I remember thinking, okay, I was needing to go down there. So I said, well, I'll take Elyssia down there, and I'll pray with you, because that was when you were just diagnosed with diabetes, just had been diagnosed.
Yeah.
So I sat there for a second, and I just started crying. And when I started crying, the Lord spoke to me, and he said, no, buddy, it's you. I mean, that voice was as audible as what I'm saying to you now. He said, no, buddy, it's you. And I remember picking you up, setting you on your mother's lap, and I was all teared up, got up and went down there and gave my heart to the Lord. And looked at the pastor, which had been the pastor who had been there at that church and knew us before we were there. And I looked at him and I said, you've worked really hard for this one.
Oh.
And haven't looked back. Wow. It was an awesome night, and just so thankful that that 2 weeks hadn't passed, and I was in it, because I would not have survived had I gone to Knoxville. I would not. I would have gotten caught up in some drug deals. It would have been bad. I don't know that I would have literally survived it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what timing, right?
Yes.
And for it to come about. I mean, that's just God's perfect timing. But I actually remember that night a little bit. I was 6 years old, and I had no idea. I'm learning all of this today about the guy. But I do remember sitting on your lap, and I remember you picked me up and gave me to Mom, and I thought, oh, wow, Dad's going up to the front. I've never seen this. That's pretty cool. I just remember having that thought. That's all I can remember about that. I didn't really understand the magnitude. But what was it like after that day? Because I know some people will have like transitional journeys where they're kind of struggling. They've still got that struggle. And that's, that's a great testimony too in itself. But I think your story is a little different and kind of comical too.
It was. Now, I'm a committed person. When I commit to something, I am committed. And I knew I'd gotten saved. I mean, I felt different. The sky was bluer. My eyes were clearer. I felt like the weight of the world was off my shoulders. It was just so refreshing. And the next day, I was I ran a branch for a heavy equipment company. Actually, I was running 3 branches for them at that time. And so I called my boss and I said, hey, well, first I called Nina Patrick. Nina was one of my customers, their mother. He was a preacher that owned the company, and that was his mother. And Nina had been such a witness to me when I was living in the world. When I would go visit them at their business, she would always talk to me about the Lord. And I'll never forget, she told me something that really stuck. I didn't realize how much it stuck with me until I got saved. And she was the first person I called to tell her I had gotten saved. And but she was telling me one day, she said, I said, yeah, you guys, they were talking about church. I said, yeah, you guys have your little church parties. You have your little get-togethers, your little dinners. And I said, that's great. I said, you all are comfortable with that, and I understand. And she said, now, buddy, serving the Lord, that's not serving the Lord. She said, no, you remember you told me you quit smoking. And I said, I did. She said, why did you quit smoking? And I said, well, because I'd promised myself when they got to be $1 a pack, or I had smoked for 20 years, that I was going to quit. And I said, and guess what? It was 20 years and they were $1 a pack. And I said, so I quit. I quit cold turkey. And she said, so you made a personal choice. And I said, well, Nana, I did. And she said, well, serving God is just that. It's a personal choice. It's not about a church. It's not about dinners. It's not about get-togethers. It's about a personal choice. And unwittingly, that stuck with me so vividly in my spirit, not in my mind, but in my spirit, that when I got saved, I knew that was a transformative moment, a transformative, prophetic thing that she said to me that day that really was one of the catalysts to come to my senses and to realize that I need to get my life together.
Yeah. Tell me about the driving in the vehicle moment. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was maybe the day after you got saved. You were on a mission and didn't get home until late that night. When did that happen?
That was different. Let me back up, though. You were asking me about who I told. Well, I told my boss next, and I'll never forget what he said. He was not a very religious man. And he said, no. He said, but don't you tell anybody that. Don't you tell people you got saved. Wow. I said, why is that? He said, because you're one of those shallow seeds. He said, now, I'm not quite sure what that means, but I'm pretty sure you're going to be one of those shallow seeds. And I just kind of blew that off. And then I told the president of the company that I'd gotten saved. And he said, you got saved? And I said, yeah. He said, from what? And I said, I guess me. So I did not get a lot of encouragement at my place of employment at the time, but I was committed and it was great. But what you're talking about came a couple weeks later.
Couple weeks. Okay.
Yeah, it was about 2 weeks later, and I'll never forget your mother. We were there in church, and it was a really nice service going on, and a lot of people going up and prayed to get the Holy Ghost. Well, I was watching, I still had a lot of a different denomination in me, and I didn't really understand a lot. So your mom looked at me and said, you need to go up there. And I said, why do I need to go up there? She said, you need to get the Holy Ghost. And I said, well, I just got saved 2 weeks ago, and I don't know what the Holy Ghost is.
Oh, fun.
So I go up there, and I get filled with the Holy Ghost. And
Love it.
I had no earthly idea what it was, but it happened.
Wow.
And it was awesome. And this guy saw me. He could tell, I probably had a deer in the headlight look going out of the church, still trying to everything to process what had happened. And so he met me at the door, and he said, "Look," he said, if you don't quite understand what happened tonight," he said, just ask the Lord to reveal this to you tomorrow. And I can take you to the place I was on the side of the road when I asked the Lord to confirm all this with me, and he did. And I couldn't go to work. I got this evangelistic spirit all over me. I drive down to Tennessee, and I'm preaching to the guys I used to do drugs and run around with, trying to get all them saved.
Wow.
And I come back home, spent the whole day out there, came back home about 10 o'clock that night and looked at your mom, and she said, "Where have you been?" I said, "Why didn't you tell me it was this good?
Oh.
Why didn't you tell me it could be this good?" And she always says, "I almost had the spirit of slap come on me, buddy, because I had told you that."
Oh, wow. So this is such an incredible story. You go from, just low down, bottom of the barrel, addicted to almost everything that you could think of, to this on fire, exuberant, going to the party houses, telling them about what's happened. And it's such an instant transformation. So my question now is, what would you tell young men, older men, anybody who's had a battle with any kind of addiction, and maybe they're still warring with that and still walking with that, and they're getting better, but they haven't quite got to where they need to be, or maybe they're just really, they've had that addictive past, but they're ready to be on fire for God. What advice would you give them? What command would you give them?
The first thing you have to do is forgive yourself. That's the first thing you have to do. When you realize that you're at a crossroads, God will forgive you. And that was a tough thing for me to understand, that I did a lot of things I wasn't proud of. And I had to ask forgiveness from some people about them. And that was a hard thing to do. But, the good thing is it doesn't really matter if somebody looks you back in the eye and says you're forgiven. As long as God's forgiven you, you're forgiven. You hope that others will understand, but, sometimes the hurt is too deep in other people, but they'll remember that you asked them for that forgiveness. But you are forgiven, and that's the hardest thing to do. Is I kind of equate that to when you go to the altar to pray about things. You have these burdens, things that you want to leave there. You go down to leave them, and a guy gave me this visual one time of the cross being there, and you put your burden on a sticky note and you stick it up there on the cross. But then our problem is once we stick it on the cross, when we start to leave the altar, we have a tendency to pick it back off the cross and take it back with us. But once God is so loves us so much that once we stick it on that cross, he really wants us to leave it there. He doesn't want us to take it off. So a lot of those battles are in our own minds. To get off of drugs, I was so blessed that God just took all desire away from me. Just stripped it. It was amazing. It was miraculous. And, I just want to tell people you can do that. That can be your destiny as well. You don't have to live a life where you're not happy, you're not proud of what you do. There's a better way. You don't wake up feeling good. You wind up waking up saying, "Man, I created this mess last night. I've got to somehow straighten up." You don't have to have those nights that you wake up the next day and you've got a mess you have to straighten up. You can live a good life. You can live a fulfilling life, and you can live a life that you can help other people. People help me. I never looked until after the Lord had dealt with me how many people carried me through much of my life, loved me and carried me through, helped me through so many times in my life when otherwise I would have been very alone, and I probably made some terrible decisions. So if you've made those decisions and you're not happy with them, you can change them. And I know that for me, the best way I changed them was first to admit that I had a problem. And once I admitted I had a problem, that I allowed God to help me. And then I hung around people that were good people that wanted to see me do better. Now, was it instantaneous? I had a problem with foul language.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you a really funny story. These guys, the deacons in the church, they were so nice, and they loved me, and I loved to play golf then. So they all said, we'll get him out on a golf course, and they really wanted to kind of keep me under the wing to make sure I didn't drift back out into the world, which I'm so thankful for that. But I wasn't going. But there were still some old habits that I had to break. So we're out on the golf course, and I hit this really errant tee shot. And I said one of the old familiar things that I used to say all the time on the golf course. And I turned around, there stood three deacons. And I said, I am really sorry. And I never cursed after that. That was the last curse word that I ever said. It was terrible.
I think we all need that, right? If we cuss in our house, then that visual of three deacons, like,
but
we all need that.
They did not say a word. They didn't condemn me. They didn't say, you need to straighten up. But man, when I looked at them, I thought, oh my goodness, these guys think I'm crazy. They're going to give up on me.
Oh, well, I'm so glad that they were so gracious with you. And, how could they not be? You're such a nice guy. I'm partial because you're my dad, but you're hard not to like. So they're like, we got to make sure that he stays on the straight and narrow. But Buddy, it has been such an honor and so fun and so funny to have you on here today, and so lighthearted. And I'm just so excited that you were able to join me as a guest today. And guys, if you want to check out what Buddy's doing now and changing men's lives and helping in ministry, so make sure you go and check them out, and go check Buddy and Veronica, my mom and dad's YouTube channel, out with Dove Song Ministries on YouTube, and support them. And make sure you send this and over to someone that has faced any sort of addiction in their life. So if you have family members, or if you know someone, a friend that's struggling with these things, please share this, because this could be the word that they need to plant that seed and get them on the right path. Hey, make sure that you hit those buttons on the side and you subscribe. That way you're always notified when we put out a new episode. And I love you guys so much. Until then, make sure that you're praying, reading your word, and staying faithful. I love you guys. Have an incredibly blessed week.